Wow, so The Walking Dead and AMC are just going ham with all of these announcements these days, right? I feel like I would be hugely mistaken by saying that 2022 is going to be one of the biggest years for The Walking Dead that we've ever seen. Not just with this new announcement, but also we have Tales of the Walking Dead coming out. We have the Rick Grimes movies that have to have some news coming forward, as well as the Daryl and Carol spinoff, more Fear the Walking Dead, and the end of The Walking Dead. And all this promise for 2023 is going to be pretty big for the entire universe. Obviously, if you don't know what I'm talking about, you kind of got a sense from it in the title. AMC gave us the announcement that we're getting a 6-episode season of Isle of the Dead that's going to be starring Negan and Maggie. That's right, Lauren Cohen and Jeffrey Dean Morgan reprising their roles as two of the biggest characters left on the show. In fact, man, I would actually go as far as saying, as much as we know about Carol and Daryl and the fact that they're getting their own show, and I'm going to talk about that in just a second, those two characters, Maggie and Negan, I feel like have just a lot more potential when it comes to the future of the series. And the fact that we're going to get a spinoff with both of them, not only does it bring up a lot of questions that we're going to be talking about, but it also is way more exciting than any of the other news that we've gotten. And this is even over Tales of the Walking Dead, which has a phenomenal cast and is looking really interesting. Of course, because every single one of those episodes is a character that we already know or we haven't been introduced to, and you don't have much more than an episode or maybe even 2 or 3 to deal with those characters and their stories, it's just not a whole lot for us to kind of grab onto and get overly excited about. Here we have some very established characters that have a lot more of a dynamic to kind of build drama upon than we have with Carol and Daryl in their own spinoff. I said we're going to be talking about that, and I did a video on it if you want to go see all my thoughts, but just suffice it to say that Daryl and Carol getting a spinoff to me always seemed a little bit suspect. The idea that we're going to have these two main characters from season 1 survive until the end and get their own spinoff acting somewhat as a season 12 of the main show always felt a little suspect to me. And I've always kind of thought that they're using this announcement, or at least the announcement of that television show, to hide the fact that they were going to kill Norman Reedus or Melissa McBride sometime before the end of season 11. And that one of those characters was going to take the burden of that death and maybe all the other stuff that happens, go off on their own. And while we will get both of them in the series, it's mostly going to be in that person's head, as we've seen time and time again throughout the entire series. And I do feel like that would make a whole lot of sense for a very short season. And don't get me wrong, I don't feel like any of these shows are meant to last as long as The Walking Dead. I could be wrong there. Maybe 2-3 seasons of the Maggie and Negan show, 2, 3, 4, 5 seasons of Carol and Daryl if they want. But to me, it always feels like they're going to do a very short season and see where they go from there. Maybe continue it with movies, TV movies, other limited series, Tales of the Walking Dead episodes, stuff like that, instead of another long drawn out process. Because don't get me wrong, one of the reasons they're doing this more than anything, and I'm not even talking about just ending The Walking Dead, I'm talking about doing all of these major spinoffs with characters that we know and love, is because when The Walking Dead first came on, when, all the way back in 2010, the world of streaming and television as we knew it isn't really what it was. So even though The Walking Dead is and was and continues to be a bit of a juggernaut when it comes to premium television on cable, they do not have some of the same deals as other juggernaut television series that have come across the airwaves after The Walking Dead premiered. The reason for that is because you kind of get locked into these contracts where you have, Netflix picking up each individual episode to stream exclusively on their site for a lot less than probably what it was owed. So ending The Walking Dead allows AMC, especially now as they're trying to promote AMC Plus, a chance to not only build their brand with exclusive content that niche audiences, but a big niche audiences really want to continue to watch, and will pay for the privilege of not only watching it, but watching it early on a week-to-week basis. Those people like myself go and they pay for AMC Plus. It also allows a rerun situation where they have to start renegotiating with Netflix, Amazon Prime, Hulu, or whoever wants to really hold this stuff internationally. And that actually stretches pretty far because Fox was a fairly big distributor of The Walking Dead before Disney bought them. So now you're starting to see The Walking Dead pop up on Disney Plus of all places. I feel like people in the States would kind of get a kick of that because it feels like everywhere besides the United States, Disney Plus is just like this top brand streaming service that is pretty much airing everything that Hulu and Disney would do, and yet we're still just getting all the kids stuff. I know that this is kind of really off point, but I feel like if they just got rid of Hulu altogether and put it in Disney Plus would be the best streaming service, hands down by far, and it would be awesome. It's just never going to happen. Or at least it's not going to happen for a while, and I don't understand it. Anyway, getting back to Isle of the Dead, the Maggie and Negan spinoff taking place in New York. Look at this poster. This poster kind of hints at a lot of things, primarily Lincoln Street, Andrew Lincoln, Rick Grimes movies. What are they trying to do here, and what's the main goal of this series? I don't really want to focus on that right now because everything with The Walking Dead in these movies has been so far up in the air. A lot of things that we've seen this year would seem to suggest that they had a plan. Specifically, they had a plan in 2018 when they first announced it, and now they have really started to maneuver and build the, pieces elsewhere to try to reconfigure what this movie is actually going to be about. I feel like The World Beyond, if you watch those 20 episodes and kind of started to understand what they were doing, felt like they tagged on that end scene because the Rick Grimes movies themselves changed dramatically with the scope and what they wanted to do and what was possible with this series. Not just because they had a better idea, but because AMC wanted to end The Walking Dead proper when they thought it was going to go on for season 12, 13, 14, 15, just indefinitely. So now they have to do all of these spin-offs and they have to tell all of these interconnected stories that aren't as straightforward as they wanted to be. So now we're going overseas and we're doing all this other stuff, and potentially characters like Maggie and Negan are going to go off and try to find Rick for themselves, as well as Daryl and Carol in their own spin-off. And what that means for everybody else, specifically the B-level characters of The Walking Dead, like Rosita, Gabriel, Aaron, Jerry, Eugene, all these other characters that we've come to know and love, or even specific locations like Alexandria, which they've already started taking down the sets in Georgia, so they're just completely done with it. Like, we're not going to be seeing it in the same capacity that we have been seeing it over the course of, the last 7 or so years. That's just done now. They can remake the sets, sure, but they're not going to have it standing like they were over the last couple of years. It's just not going to happen anymore. So what that means in the long run, or how this series is going to end, is really still up in the air. I would argue that this specifically means that we're not going to get the time jump that we got in the comic books. For anyone who hasn't read the comic books, The Walking Dead is just so unbelievably different when it comes to how they adapted the comic book onto the screen. There's so many inconsistencies and so many different avenues that it's pretty much its own universe of stories. The television show being a broader context, kind of an afterthought, a way for them to kind of revise what Kirkman did and do their best to make it better. And I would argue, being an avid fan of both, I would argue that the television show has done the story better. Although there is certain aspects of the story that I really wish we got to see adapted on screen, primarily a lot of stuff that's happening in the Commonwealth story arc. But the strength of some of the characters like Negan, Jeffrey Dean Morgan, I feel like his portrayal of Negan is far more nuanced and more interesting than it ever was in the comic book. And also specifically Maggie, these two characters that are getting their spinoff, I feel like her leadership and the way that she was groomed to be the person that she is now comes across far better than it ever did in the comic books when it was adapted on screen. You might have a different opinion, that's just what I'm saying. Anyway, with that being said, I don't know what they're going to be doing with this specific spinoff. In the comic books, Negan is pretty much left. So where the television show is, at least in terms of where the comic book storyline is, it's kind of matched up with Negan leaving, and he has no more story arc until the very last chapter, and then just a special comic book that they made well after the series finished, none of which seems to be a direct adaptation for where we're going with the story. We already know that Negan is still around in season 11, and that he is going to play a prominent role sometime in the near future, probably even the next episode if you have AMC Plus, but we're just gonna have to wait and see. With that being said, I do want to say something just a little bit controversial about what this series should potentially be and characters that I think it should focus on during those first 6 episodes. Specifically, I want them to figure out a way to create a romantic relationship between Negan and Maggie during the course of this series. And I know a lot of people are going to huff and haw on that because of what Negan did to Glenn and the fact that Maggie obviously wants revenge on Negan, and that that's going to be a bit of a dynamic between them as the series goes forward, not only with The Walking Dead, but also this spinoff. And look, don't get me wrong, I am all for that dynamic. I want it to continue. I feel like it was the strongest thing in season 11A, and in fact, I feel like the only reason they did the Reaper arc was to not only build that relationship, but also set the stage for something like this in the future. With that said, whether it was intentional or not, a lot of the scenes that we got with Maggie and Negan over the course of season 11A came off with an incredible amount of sexual tension between these two characters. Kind of like, okay, just fucking get it over with. You know what I mean? Like, there's no better way for them to get over what they're trying to do unless they just simply kill each other. And I don't know exactly what Scott Gimple and all of them want to do, but I don't think it's going to be that compelling to see Maggie and Negan walking cross country just to kind of kill each other, right? There just has to be a little bit more to it than that. I feel like this would be the best way to complete Negan's redemption arc, other than just one less thing I want to talk about. But specifically, I feel like the series has done a decent enough job having Negan answer for some of the sins that he committed over the course of season 6, 7, and 8, but there are still 2 there that I think need to be addressed for him to have a completed redemption arc. One of which is having Maggie and or Herschel forgive him for what he did to Glenn. Now, you don't need an intimate relationship between Maggie and Negan in order to accomplish that, but given all of the tension that we saw in the last part of the season, I don't know, I feel like that would be one of the more interesting ways that you can kind of deal with it. You know, over the course of the season. It doesn't have to be immediate, and it doesn't have to be near the end of this show, but as the last season of The Walking Dead progresses, you kind of continue this will they, won't they situation until finally they get together and they go off together. And then it's kind of this I hate you, I love you situation throughout those first 6 episodes, to the point where, you know, they're finally on good terms by the end of it, and you don't know exactly what the relationship is, but at least it was dealt with in one way or another. Now, the second one I feel like is a lot harder, at least in terms of setting it up. Fear the Walking Dead has been dealing a lot with Dwight and Sherry dealing with Negan. The fact that they both want revenge for what he did to them, and also dealing specifically with Negan's wives and the abuse that he put people through over the course of those several years into the apocalypse. And the show itself has swept this under the rug. Nobody has questioned him on it, and no one really wants to deal with it. Fortunately, there, I do feel like you have to put Dwight and Sherry on Maggie and Negan's path in order to have Sherry confront Negan about this and either forgive him or give a better explanation as to what Negan was thinking during all of this and somewhat answer exactly what happened. Like, did he force himself on any of these women? Did he do any of this stuff that really demoralized him as a character? Jeffrey Dean Morgan has tried to sweep this under the rug by saying that, oh, in my mind, Negan never really did anything. He was just kind of doing this to have companionship, but he didn't really violate. They never once explained that in the show, and the show has done its best to forget any of that ever happened, and that is just such a weird mark on the series as a whole, especially as they're trying to show Negan as this redeemed character who is a lot better than what he used to be. You just don't get it both ways, Walking Dead, and in order for it to be valid, in order to complete his redemption arc and have Negan be not only one of the best characters in the show, but probably one of the best characters in the entire series, not just the video games, the comic books, the television show, and everything that it's ever touched, you need him to deal with that. And that would probably be the best way to do it, just bringing characters into this show that are on Fear the Walking Dead, which, is hard because of the nuclear fallout and everything there. But as far as I'm aware, Dwight is on Fear the Walking Dead because of the stuntman death that happened a couple years ago, and he couldn't be on The Walking Dead anymore for legal reasons. I'm not entirely sure if that's the case. It's what I've been told. So if The Walking Dead itself is ending, I can totally see them then bringing those two characters back into the fold, and maybe that's one of the reasons they've been building that story that I just have to confront this, and eventually by the end of season 8 of Fear the Walking Dead, they're going to go off and show up in New York for some reason or another. That show is also enough behind everything where it would totally make sense that those two characters can make their way from Texas to New York before the events of The Walking Dead end, and all that stuff just kind of goes into the fold. I don't know if that's going to happen, but those are just my thoughts and speculations. Of course, I don't really know what this means for Herschel, and we were all thinking the same thing when it came to Judith and RJ. Like, Daryl is their caretaker. Is he going to run off with Carol and just completely forget them after Michonne did that, after Rick unintentionally did that? I mean, how much trauma can all these children go through losing their parents? That's weird to me, but I mean, we're just gonna have to wait and see. Guys, tell me what your thoughts are on this. I know I was rambling a lot in this video, but I'm excited and I just wanted to share my thoughts and opinions on it. I hope everyone's having a fantastic day. It's been real.